We say history begins when we show up, but our real history begins, our North American history begins long before that.
The Navajo Nation is one of the more than 560 original sovereign governments of this land.
Indigenous people are around 1% of the U.S. population. 100% of this at one time was native land. Today, less than 3% remains in the hands of native peoples. 100% to less than 3%. 1% of the total U.S. population is indigenous people. If you really want to understand and appreciate the history of the United States, you have to understand the history of the United States to the indigenous peoples of this land.
One of the things we talk about is the Treaty of 1868. How would you contrast it with another treaty of 1868 that the Lakotas and other groups?
With our treaty, we lost a lot of land base, and here they gained a lot.
You think about the Navajo Treaty of 1868, and it's a treaty, I would argue, that is as much about triumph as it is about tragedy. The initial reservation base is about 3.5 million acres. Today's Navajo Nation is 4 to 5 times that big. We think about too often about Indian history solely in terms of military battles, okay? Battlefields. But there have been battlefields all along in different ways. And one of them certainly was this battlefield at the treaty negotiations. And you read that more closely, you hear Barboncito's words, when we are able to go back to our own country, we will be as happy as the land. Black clouds will rise, and there will be plenty of rain. It's an amazing story. It's an American story. It's a story that most of us do not know well enough. It's also a continuing story, one that promises to us that the Navajos are not only here, but will always be here.
During the afternoon, the participants explored Canyon de Chelly, an important historical location for the Navajo.
Canyon de Chelly, the Navajo name for it is Tseyet. And you are at the site of the fortress. This was the place that Navajo sought refuge from Kit Carson's scorch and burn policy in the summer of 1863.
They cut down thousands of peach trees, burned crops, and killed the livestock of the Navajos and starved them into submission. And from here, led the Navajos on the long walk to Bosque Redondo in southeastern New Mexico, where they spent 4 years imprisoned.
On day 2, the great-great-great-granddaughter of Chief Manuelito, Dr. Dennett Dale, shared her research and insight with us.
When his father learned of his son's birth, he took the newborn outside and presented him to the east, to the holy people, and prophesied that his son would be a great leader. He blessed his son, saying, "My baby will touch the earth with his feet. He will hold his head toward the sky, hold his right hand to the east and his left hand to the west. He will know everything on this earth. His thinking will be valuable, and the people will listen to his words." Manuelito's father then placed in his infant son's mouth medicine made by placing an object in the animal's mouth and then in the infant's mouth. And so you can see that there was a prophecy at his birth, you know, that he would be a leader and that his people would remember his thinking. You know? And I find that today, indeed, we do remember our great leader.
I absolutely love what you said about how we need to decolonize. I thought that was just so dead on.
We need to decolonize our people, our communities, and our nations.
So that was my aha moment since we've been here.
During the afternoon and evening, the participants experienced the spectacular Monument Valley.
I'm standing in the middle of Monument Valley. We've just had a wonderful trip looking at many of the scenic details and having the guys explain how many of the monuments here fit into Navajo history. In the We the People curriculum, the information here fits in as a counterpoint all throughout the book. We learn, of course, about the Founding Fathers and the Constitution, but the formation of the colonies and the states fits in a context where they were taking over land and negotiating with the eastern tribes. So to understand the perspective of the tribal peoples is quite important. In another unit, we study the expansion of rights, and so the struggle of the Native peoples as groups, not simply individuals, fighting for their communal rights as well as individual rights. That's an important counterpoint, because in the United States, we're proud of our rights as individuals, but they're strongly expressing a communal right to self-determination, and that's really what they want. In terms of powers, everybody knows about checks and balances and the federal system, which is the national government and the state governments and the town and local governments. But the pueblos and the tribal areas are also significant federal units that have different degrees of autonomy than would be found among any of the American citizen groups. And the last unit in the book is about citizenship, and citizenship has to do with the idea of belonging and what does it mean to belong. And of course, we're citizens of our states, all American citizens of the national government, but the Native peoples have a third affiliation that's quite distinct.
Teachers that come to the Navajo Nation, I want to help them to show them, hey, this is our culture, this is how I think it should be taught, so that at least they have a foundation also. I want to be able to present lessons to help these teachers out.